All right, John. So we have a lot of flexibility in creating vSAN clusters. How big should I make a vSAN cluster?
So we've already addressed how big could you build one. You can 16 petabytes raw, go to the moon. But, I like to think of the greatest IT movie of all time, Jurassic Park. It's a lovely tale about it's kind of a sad tale of an underdog IT worker who's overworked and underpaid. And he then tries to kill everyone with dinosaurs because of it. But there's a quote from that movie. And Dr. Malcolm says, you were so focused on if you could, you never thought if you should. And that's something we should think about with fault domains and how large we build them. And vSAN does provide incredible resilience, incredible availability. We can do also things like fault domains or stretch clustering. We can do nested RAID levels between that. We can do all these things to keep, failure from causing problems. But there are things at a cluster boundary to where we may decide to say, you know what, we've reached 14 hosts. We've got X number of capacity. It's time to stop and build another cluster rather than just keep going bigger. There are benefits to large clusters. There's a great guide on core.vmware, trade-offs of large and small clusters that goes over that. But, maybe there's a thing like, for instance, I want my clusters to be confined to a single rack. So if something happens with PDUs in a rack, it doesn't conflate and take out, 10 petabytes of data or something. So I might say, hey, I'm using 2 rack servers. I can only get a dozen of these or 16 of these within a rack. So 16 is as big as we go. Or maybe I'm in an old data center and I don't have very much power to my rack. So I realistically can't run more than X number of hosts in that rack. So a lot of power cooling density things. Maybe if I found some exotic server chassis that'll let me stuff, actually use 5 disk groups to the maximum and put 40 devices into a host. The problem is that device may not fit in the rack, or if I start doing that, the thermal density may start getting to the point that you walk to the hot aisle and, your face starts melting off. Like, it's Indiana Jones and the what was The Last Crusade, or that, that movie. So we're doing a lot of movies today on this video, but this is a thing to where, when we start looking at uptime, we need to think holistically. And let's say something bad happens, there's a code level issue. Maybe I've, got some type of thing, or maybe there's a user operator issue. And it takes multiple clicks to power off a vSAN cluster. Maybe a forklift comes and takes the wrong cluster that's still powered on. I mean, this happened to one large banking customer I've talked to. There's lots of reasons why you might say, you know what, how many virtual machines, or how large of a cluster, if I had to do a total restore or there was an outage and I had to deal with that many help desk calls, how many simultaneous users do I want to address having an outage? There's all kinds of factors. So this isn't really a technical limit anymore. This is a operational limit. And that's what we need to think about. We need to stop looking at spec sheets and start thinking about operationally, what am I comfortable with is my scaling boundary.
Oh, and I love that part, especially the element about how when, with other architectures where you had let's say a 3-tier architecture and an external storage array, that storage was never a resource exclusively of a single cluster. It was serving up all different kinds of things. And so you had this weird boundary of failures that was always really challenging to figure out. Well, it's really different with vSAN. And so why not take advantage of that architecture to introduce, more operational efficiencies there, being able to, update those hosts in a more efficient way because you have smaller, more compartmentalized vSAN clusters that are maybe tailor-made for some of the groups within your business. So a lot of flexibility there, it seems like.
Yeah, those smaller clusters, they allow you to say, I'm going to run my VDI at a newer code level, or maybe I've got some compatibility concerns with a cloud management platform tool that I'm using, and I want to keep this cluster in an older version. This is just a lot different than, I lost an entire Memorial Day of my life to, we had this one storage array that was feeding an entire data center of 4 racks. And we had to power everything off and everything on because we were doing a forklift upgrade, or there was a scenario. And so, we did these things with storage arrays because they were very expensive back in the day. The controllers were, there was a lot of overhead. There was a lot of cost efficiencies of just building these just massive arrays. But once we started being able to get, I think like a petabyte within a single fault domain, I think we started reaching the point where it's all collectively become less about cost efficiency and more starting to become just a collective, how tall can we build this tower? And
Yeah.
we got to think a little bit more broadly than that.